Hi, good evening, and welcome to Varsity Maine Live, the show that scratches your itch for all things Maine high school sports. For the Portland Press Herald, I'm Travis Lazarczyk, and tonight I'm joined by my colleague from the Press Herald, Steve Craig, and Michael Hoffer from the Forecaster. Our guest tonight is in her 10th season as the head girls soccer coach at Windham High School. She won Class A state championships with the Eagles in 2013 and 2014. Before that, she was the head coach at Falmouth, winning 3 of 4 state championships in her 4 years there. And right now, her team enters the playoffs at 14-0, number one seed in Class A South. Deb LeBel, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Like we just said, your team's 14-0, number one in a league that's very tough to accomplish that feat. Tell us what's working well for your team so far this season.
We've got a really talented group of girls. One thing that I really feel like we've gone into the season with, and we've just grown stronger, is team chemistry. We don't have a lot of unselfish play right now. I have 2 different girls with over 20 goals. And I feel like in the past, sometimes, it's been a little bit selfish at times, but this year they definitely, sometimes I want them to shoot. But team chemistry and really having each other's back has been great.
Deb, I know the girls themselves weren't part of those teams in 2013 and 14, but you were unbeaten those years as well. Does that help you sort of know how to navigate? Because sometimes coaches don't like the fact that they've got such a clearly defined target that they hadn't lost a game yet.
So we talked about that at practice today. We brought back one of my old assistants, Jim Stewart, and he was great. He came to practice today with a shirt we had from the 2013 season, and he asked one of our seniors to look at that and compare it to our season, and it was very similar. We had shut out a bunch of teams. The only team we had tied was Scarborough, and then he said, "Okay, so now look down at the playoffs," and then the scores got very different. We won, a 3-2, maybe a 2-1, and maybe a 4-2. And what he told those girls was every single one of those games we came from behind. It's like they wanted to really just make every game a game, and it was it made the tournament a lot of fun to watch for us. It was a little gut wrenching. So, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of the players, just really hardworking, close knit group, and a ton of talent spread throughout the field. So it's really hard to key in on one player. Back then, and I would say we have a similar situation now. You can key in on one player, but you got to watch out for 3 or 4 others, because they're going to pick up the slack if you take one person, so to eliminate them.
Coach, every year when I talk to you and to other coaches, they always say the league is so deep. This year, I think you're really telling me the truth, because the league is extremely deep, and there are more than a couple other teams that you have to contend with. I mean, there are 5, 6, maybe more teams that have a legitimate shot at winning a state title, and a chance to talk about some of the teams that you're most concerned with. And I know you don't want to disrespect anybody, but the teams that you see as your biggest competition here over the next couple of weeks.
I would agree with you 100%, Michael. There's you can't really discount anybody. 5 or 6 teams deep there. Chevrolet gave us our toughest, probably our toughest game. We went into double overtime, and we scored with like 34 seconds left. They've got a couple really good players, and their goalie she stopped everything. Gorham gave us a great game. I think we're going to see them right in the mix. And then we didn't see Scarborough, which is really, it's such a bummer. We used to finish with them every season, and it was a great way to finish the season. So, I think that's going to be, we hope to see them. Falmouth also gave us a great game. Their keeper is amazing and really, really tough to score on. So if she has an amazing game, that's going to be a really tough game to win as well. We didn't see TA as well. They were the other team that we didn't get to see. And I think they've gotten better and better, each game as well. So I do think it's going to come down to the team that, puts best 80 minutes together with the fewest mistakes, because it's going to be one mistake could be it. And I just hope we're not on the end of that.
Coach, you mentioned your goal scoring ability this year, but you guys only gave up 5 goals all regular season. Talk about your defensive effort this year.
Yeah, our defense, we came into the season really, we had to fill a couple spots, and we have a freshman who really steps up, Stella Jarvis. I knew she was a decent player, but she's really, you would never think that she's a freshman. Other coaches is that who's 19. That's Stella. She's a freshman. No way, she's not a freshman. She really plays beyond her years. She's really solidified that. Amelia Mortoriero behind her has been on varsity all 4 years. Great leadership this year. And really almost like another coach on the team. She has, she's great with everybody. There's actually that's Pia. And then our 2 outside backs have been filled by a couple different kids. We had some injuries, and everyone has really stepped up nicely. So we'll probably be playing with a mixture of kids back there. But they communicate well, and they really, really work well together.
Hey, Deb, fortunately, your team has played all 14 games, and most of the Class A South teams, I think, were able to. But I'm wondering, do you still are you still on pins and needles that, you could get a COVID outbreak or a close contact and 5 kids have to sit right here on the eve of the playoffs?
I just had that discussion today at practice. I said,
so I guess I was just reading your mind then, right?
You really were. I said, and they all rolled their eyes. Here we go again. I'm always talking about making good decisions. This year, it's my decisions. I'm talking a little differently. Please don't share drinks. Those of you who are dating people, maybe we could, keep them at arm's length for a couple of weeks. I don't want anybody to, have to sit out. Unfortunately, we started the season with some of our team affected, and thankfully we had a lighter schedule to start because our record could be very different. So I'm hoping that we've been affected by that and overcome it. I hope that none of the teams, get hit, because it would really be a shame at this point for us not to see a really true full team, as an opponent for anyone.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, hopefully it doesn't happen, but I mean, we see it. Unfortunately, it seems like every week with the football where games are being canceled, and it just feels like at some point during somewhere, in these playoffs that's going to happen, and a team will advance without playing, right? Which I guess that'll, so hopefully it doesn't happen in your league.
Yeah, we are knocking on wood. So hopefully everybody's doing all their good deeds and just, taking as many precautions as they can so nobody is affected. Yeah.
Coach, building on my earlier question about there's so many good teams, but there's also it seems to me, an abundance of really good players right now as well. And not just in Class A. I mean, you're familiar with all the Class A kids, but you've got players like Maggie Cochran and Caitlin D'Apollonia and Ava Feely in Class B, and even some of the NYA kids in Class D. It just seems like it's a really healthy time for girls soccer. I mean, how do you feel about the state of the game at this point?
I do think as we're starting to, vote for players and meetings are coming up, there's a lot. It's tough to narrow it down to. Even when you're voting for your own kids, it's, there are so many. And I really think that, the youth sports, there's, most towns have a strong youth organization. Windham definitely does. And I would, I thank them for that, because I think that really has helped our success in terms of the community, building these players at a younger level. And I do think it's really strong in the South, which has led to a lot of these strong players. What I'm liking about some of my team is they're multi-sport kids, which I'm a big fan of. So it's nice to see some of these strong players. One of my strongest players, Sarah Talon, her strongest sport is basketball, but her love for soccer, you see it out on the field. She's not going to give up. So I think that some of these multi-sport athletes, I've said to the basketball coach a couple times, hey, I'm grooming these kids well for you guys to have a great winter. They're getting a ton of minutes and a ton of great experiences in playing some of these tougher games. They should be ready for you. So I think it's carrying over as well.
Okay, Coach, your game on Saturday mornings, your first round playoff games against Massabesic. What can you tell us about the Mustangs?
Well, the first time we played them, we had a score of 8-0. It was pretty early in the season, second weekend. I'm sure they've advanced, gotten better. Everybody, as we've watched teams later in the season, they've all gotten a little bit better. We should be the stronger team. But I do think, they've got a fairly strong midfield and defense. I'm expecting them to play probably a pretty defensive game. Sure. We do have some speed up top, which could cause them some problems. But they really have progressed as the season has gone on.
Deb, I'd like to ask you a question that's not specific to your team or Class A South, but just I did look at the Class A South coaching list, and 7 of the 17 girls soccer coaches are women. Obviously, one is you. Is that a good number relative to the past? And what can we do? What should there be a greater emphasis, I guess, on hiring women to coach girls programs?
I would say 7's a little low.
Okay.
I get really excited when I see some of the new coaches coming in and they're women. We've talked about this a little bit, Jean Zarrilli from Gorham and I. Why is it that there are so few women in the coaching? It's tough, though. I got to tell you, having little kids and trying to balance their schedule, I do feel like, and maybe I'm being a little sexist, the mom sometimes does take more of that role on. Even this fall, I had to, make a decision. My husband got a new job where I knew in our athletic director, Rich Drummond, he's great. He's like, don't give up yet. He said, let's see how it goes this fall. And it was great. I've surrounded a great group of friends and teachers who one friend drives my oldest to his practice every Thursday night because we have games. And I would say that that's really what makes it work, is surrounding yourself with a good tribe of people who are really willing to help you out at any phone call. I would love to see more, females in. I was able to recruit one of our former players, Cassie Simons.
Oh, nice.
It was great. She was supposed to be our first team coach this year. Unfortunately, because of our numbers, we just had 2 teams, but she stayed on as our JV assistant. She was amazing with those girls. And I really hope that she'll stick around. I'm not sure where her job, if it'll keep her in Maine. But I know there's, the new Bonnie Eagle coach was a former, Gorham player. She's had a great season as well. And I would say, I think Marshwood is the same. So it is really fun to see some women stepping in, and I hope it can continue, but it's a struggle. It definitely is. It's a juggling act to try to make everything without dropping the balls. And occasionally I'm like, yeah, I knew it was going to happen. And I just apologize and say, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, and actually I miscounted. I didn't know that Bonnie Eagle had hired a woman coach. So let's make it 8 of 17.
All right. So one step closer.
Yeah.
It is nice to see, and it's and I hope they stick around. I know the TA coach has young kids like myself, and as they get older, it's just tough. Unfortunately, this weekend, my son has a playoff game the same time I do, both 10 o'clock Saturday.
Oh,
Um,
really?
so I said, well, we both just have to win so we can support each other at our
There you
next
go.
game. So we'll see how that goes.
Coach, a very important question for you. You've won 5 championships. I know you're going for a 6th. Your husband has 3. Does that ever come up at home? The fact that you have more, you have bragging rights in that regard.
Well, it's funny. He's the one that brings it up. I would never bringing it up. No.
Well, you should rub it in his face, and you can tell him I said so.
Oh, I know. You know what I do love though? I love that when he does bring it up, I love that my sons hear it and that they see me as I hope a strong female role model. And they definitely are rooting for us this this upcoming couple weeks here, and they've gotten involved. My youngest loves being the ball boy, even though he's a little young. I said maybe you can do one more game, but after that it gets a little more serious. So
Great. That's a great way to end this. Coach LeBel, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks,
luck.
Deb.
Okay. We will now move on to Athletes of the Week, starting with Windham boys soccer player Sam Glikos. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. I apologize, Sam, if I killed it. Sam's a senior captain, and he helped assure the #1 seed for the Eagles in Class A South with 3 goals in Monday's 3-0 win over Bonnie Eagle. Steve, tell us about Sam.
Well, his coach, Ben Schultz, that feels like Sam is the best player in the conference, at least in Coach Ben Schultz's opinion. And certainly when you look at 17 goals, all scored over the last 11 games, he's also the central midfielder who's, according to Schultz, just plays everywhere, and he's great in, how did he put it? He's great in space. He's great in tight situations. He can play up top. He can play midfield. And apparently he has a tremendous work rate. So really a top-notch player, and the guy that drives the train, a very deep and strong train that Windham boys have as well.
Okay. Angel Huntsman of North Yarmouth Academy girls soccer. She scored in overtime to lift the Panthers to a 1-0 win over Trape Academy and keep the team undefeated. They'll be #1 in Class D South tournament coming up. From Skowhegan Field Hockey, Layla Conway. She scored 4 goals in a 7-0 win over Edward Little. From Mount Ararat Hyde football, Caden Getchell. He rushed for 257 yards and 3 touchdowns on runs of 65, 27, and 76 yards in the Eagles' 44-8 8-man football win at Marinacook. Shouldn't have the word 8 twice in a row on me like that. Falmouth Field Hockey, Chloe Bush. She scored 3 goals and had 2 assists in a 7-0 win over South Portland. Michael, what can you tell us about Chloe?
She's been in the middle of all their success. Falmouth, they really weren't viewed as a top contender coming into the season. I think they've surprised some people with how well they've played. They just won their prelim earlier tonight, 4-0 over Marshwood. So they're on to the quarterfinals, and she's really the engine of that team. She scores a lot of goals, but she assists on a lot of goals as well. And she did score in the playoff game tonight. So any success Falmouth's going to have going forward, you got to figure she's going to be right in the middle of it. She's got some very talented teammates too, but if you watch Falmouth play, she's the one that really stands out to you.
Okay. Emma West from Grey New Gloucester girls soccer. She scored 3 goals to pace the Patriots to a 6-1 win over Poland on Monday. She's a senior. Adelson Vidal, Deering boys soccer. He's a junior midfielder. He scored both goals in a 2-1 win over Thornton on Friday. Anthony Prack from Noble football. He's a senior captain. He rushed for 3 touchdowns in the Knights' 31-0 win at Edward Little, which is a Class B school beating a Class A, and Noble is now 5-2 in B South. Gabby Jerry from Edward Little girls soccer. She scored 2 goals and was the last Edward Little player to touch a Lewiston own goal, which was the game winner in a 3-2 win over their rivals on Saturday. And Gabby is just a freshman. Trevor Wozni from Marshwood boys soccer. He's a senior midfielder, and he scored 2 goals in the Hawks' 4-1 win Saturday against Portland. Marshwood finishes the regular season with an 11-2-1 record and won 5 in a row to end the regular season. Alexa Allen and Brosnan Como from Monmouth Cross Country. Allen won the MVC Cross Country Championship with a time of 20 minutes, 30.1 seconds at the University of Maine and Augusta. And Como won the MVC Boys title with a time of 17:39.9. From Dirigo football, Trenton Hutchison. He caught 3 touchdown passes and returned a punt for a score in the Cougars' 58-46 win over Yarmouth last Friday. And this isn't an athlete, but it is a team. We're going to hit on the Gardner volleyball team. They completed a 14-0 regular season for the first time, and they're the number 2 seed entering the Class B playoffs, second only to 14-0 Yarmouth, who won the past 2 state championships. Gardner won their first playoff game tonight over Lake Region, 25-9, 25-10, 25-6. So I believe they have still not lost a set this season. So that is our athletes of the week. Varsity Maine polls. These are voted on by sports reporters from around the state. Beginning with boys soccer, Lewiston remains number 1. They get all 6 first-place votes, followed by Windham at number 2, Scarborough at number 3, Yarmouth 4, and Marshwood climbs into that 5th spot on their successful end of the regular season. Michael, the tournaments, as much as we talked about the girls' Class A South being tight, I think the boys' side should be just as close.
Yeah, I can't think of a year that's been deeper. I mean, you go into most season and there's a Scarborough team that's clearly the favorite, or like you see in B with Yarmouth many years, Falmouth back in the day. You could literally make a case for 8, 9, 10 teams winning on a given day. Maybe not winning 4 games, but there are going to be some really interesting matchups. Even in the preliminary round, you got Portland and Cheverus matching up. That should be a really interesting game. You got a South Portland team ranked 3rd that no one really even talks about. They're very dangerous. Obviously, Scarborough and Falmouth have their great pedigree. Wyndham's had the best season they've had in a decade, and they're legit. I've seen them play. They're going to be really good, but they lost decisively to Gorham, who's further down the standings. You can't overlook Deering. And then there's a Marshwood team that no one's talking about up here, but they've already knocked off Portland and Scarborough, and they're going to be very tough to beat. So I think that's going to be a very fun tournament. I think you're going to see some upsets.
Steve, is there a team you're looking forward to seeing in the playoffs?
Just to kind of dovetail what Michael just said, I think the entire quarterfinal round in that Class A South, it's going to be, every game's going to be knockdown, drag out. Every lower seeded team will have a legitimate chance, whether that's Cheverus or Portland that ends up playing number 1 Windham or number 7 Gorham, right? I mean, to me, this reminds me a little bit of 2014 when Cheverus came in as the 7th seed with a 6-4-4 record. I touched on that in the story yesterday, but the 6-4-4, they were like, oh, Cheverus, but they got hot. They played great defense. I remember that year they scored on set plays. That was the key. And a couple of the coaches I talked to yesterday mentioned that it's going to come down to corner kicks, free kicks, those set plays. So that entire tournament should just be fantastic to watch. And in B, I'd say I'm looking at it'll be the regional semifinal, and you got to assume Yarmouth will be there, and it'll be either Greeley or Freeport. Right. And both teams have played 2 games against Yarmouth. Freeport tied them once. Greeley played them to a 1-goal game. I didn't see those games, but I don't know, especially where Yarmouth was tied by Wayne Fleet in the regular season finale. Now maybe they did something different or whatever, but I don't know. And whoever wins that one, I've got to believe, is going to win the regional final.
You look at Cape and Class B, Steve. I mean, they're the 7th seed, but you look at the rankings, they might have a path to get to the regional final without anywhere near the obstacles that the Freeport Greeley they're going to have to go through each other and then conceivably get through Yarmouth just to even get to a regional final. Cape's a team, especially with Tiernan Lathrop up top, and you know how good he is from lacrosse. They're a team that can't be overlooked too. If you're looking for a dark horse in B, they might be the one.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe we're just showing our Southern Maine bias and sleeping on Erskine and Gardner. I think they're the 2-3 seeds, both of whom had very strong seasons.
Okay, moving on to the girls' soccer. Windham number 1, no surprise there, with 6 first-place votes, followed by Bangor, Falmouth, Scarborough, and Cape Elizabeth. No change in the top 5. We kind of touched on the Class A South tournament a little bit with Coach LeBel. The Class B, I think, should be interesting. A lot of people are kind of assuming it's going to be Cape Elizabeth and Yarmouth on this collision course. I talked to Andrew Higgins, the coach of Yarmouth, yesterday, and he was like, just don't sleep on Madomic Valley and Erskine and some of these other teams. This is a tough league. Mike, what do you think?
And one other team I would mention, Freeport had Yarmouth beat late in the regular season. They were up by a goal. I think about a minute left. Yarmouth tied it up on a corner kick and then beat them in overtime. They could conceivably play in the quarterfinals, and I know that's a matchup that Coach Higgins and Yarmouth wouldn't be overly thrilled about playing. And then Cape Elizabeth, they might draw Greeley in the quarters, a team that knows them well. I do think at the end of the day, Cape and Yarmouth's talent is enough. You'll probably see them match up in what could be a really terrific regional final. But I think these coaches know it. They're not just going to show up and win. They've got to take these teams seriously.
Definitely. Field hockey, another poll where no changes in the top 5. We have Skowhegan number 1 with 5 first place votes. Cheverus still at number 2, picking up 1 first place votes. And then we have Scarborough, York, and Lawrence coming in 3, 4, 5. The tournament start there. Michael, I'll go back to you again. Are we looking at, we talk about collision course in Class B soccer in the region. Are we looking at a collision course between Skowhegan and Cheverus in the Class A state game?
Well, I think it's a safe bet to say Skowhegan will be there. I mean, if you're any kind of student
20
of
plus
history,
years going,
that's about as safe a bet as you can get in high school sports, and that's not to discount anyone else in that region. But you look at what's happened the last 20 years, and they're going to be there. Cheverus is a favorite. They've had a phenomenal season down here. Scarborough did play them to a 1-goal game, and it was several weeks ago now that they've played. And Scarborough's a very proud program. Massabesics had a really good season. They took Cheverus to the wire. I think Cheverus scored on a penalty corner after time expired to beat them in the finale. So you can't overlook them. And then Biddeford, the team that's won the last couple regional titles, they've quietly put together a really good season. So it's more than just a 2-team race, I think, in Class A South. But if you're going to put me on the spot, I would say there's a decent chance you're going to see a Skowhegan Cheverus state final.
Consider yourself on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay, and in football, number 1 Thornton again with 7 first place votes. Number 2 Oxford Hills stays at number 2 despite that loss to Thornton last week. Portland number 3. Wyndham moves just ahead of Bonnie Eagle to number 4, and then Bonnie Eagle is number 5. Steve, this is a good way to kind of segue into football playoffs. Start this week with 8-man playoffs.
Yeah, not really too many what I would call marquee matchups because of the way the better teams have gotten the buys.
Right.
Every division is a little bit different because of how many teams are in each. But one game that should be fairly interesting, I think, is the Maranacook, which was arguably maybe the second best team in 8-man in 2019. They lost the large school final or the semifinal, however you want to look at it, to Mount Ararat and had beaten Mount Ararat twice in the regular season. They play at Old Orchard Beach in a quarterfinal game in the small school division. So that's at Saturday at 1:30. That might be the game to watch, I would say. The next week, though, it'll get much more interesting as the better teams like Cheverus and Mount Ararat in the large South and Waterville and Morse in the large North get into the fray.
Right. I'll be at that Maranacook Old Orchard Beach game. Another 5-4 game that could be interesting Saturday night is Gray New Gloucester at Lake Region in the large school South semifinal. Right. First round.
It should be an evenly played game. I think it was 33-20 back in the season opener, Lake Region's favor. But looking at the scores, they've beaten pretty much the same 2 teams and lost by pretty sizable margins to everybody else.
Big difference between the last weekend in October and the first weekend in September, as we all know. Other games to kind of look out for real quick. The cross-country regionals are this weekend. The Class A, B, and C South are at Twin Brook and Cumberland, and the North will be at Troy Howard Middle School in Belfast. Gentlemen, any other playoff games you're looking forward to seeing, or are we just going to have to let these first-round games shake out?
It's going to be a fun week, and I we don't even know what a lot of these matchups are. I know the next week, like I said with soccer, I think you're going to see some upsets. We saw that back in the spring with everyone getting in the tournament. You're going to have some teams that just don't know anything about the other. I think that could lead to maybe some surprises, but just having fall playoffs again is going to be a lot of fun. Let's not forget we didn't get to do this a year ago, and with the exception of golf, there were no championships handed out. So I know a lot, talking to some of the kids here of late, especially younger kids who didn't get to play in a tournament last year, they're just excited to play these playoff games. And it doesn't really matter what your regular season record was. This kind of brings it all home, just how important it is to everybody and how therapeutic it is to have a quote unquote normal season again.
Can you build on that, Steve, or are you good to give Michael the last word?
I think Mike did a good job there.
Thank you.
All right.
This weekend, it's not a playoff game, but it's probably worth mentioning just because they've been, for several years, the top 2 teams in B South football. Marshwood is at Kennebunk. Normally, that's the game to decide who gets the number 1 seed and gets to host the regional final against each other. This year, it'll be to decide who's the number 2 seed and who will likely host the regional semifinal. with Portland now 7-0 and looking to go 8-0, and you know they've beaten both those teams, so Portland deserves and earned the right to be the favorite in B South.
Okay. That's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for joining us on Varsity Maine Live. Remember, you can get all your high school sports coverage at varsitymaine.com, and be sure to check us out at facebook.com and Twitter for all your updates. For Steve, for Michael, for Coach LeBel, I'm Travis. Thanks for joining us.